Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Frontline Reporter. Today we're diving into one of the most discussed developments circulating across military analysis circles, the idea that Ukraine, supported by advanced U.S. fighter platforms, may have deliberately shaped a battlefield trap that Russian forces then walked straight into. While this topic is framed dramatically online, we will focus on explaining the strategic logic, the military dynamics, and why certain operations appear to unfold in ways that give one side a sudden advantage. This is not about sensationalism, it's about understanding how modern warfare, intelligence coordination, and advanced aircraft can influence the direction of a conflict. Throughout history, wars have been shaped not just by firepower, but by timing, positioning, and deception. Ukraine's continued defense has increasingly relied on its ability to shape the battlefield, using limited but powerful assets to compensate for Russia's larger numerical advantage. When people talk about a trap, what they often mean is a coordinated set of conditions where one force predicts or guides the movement of another, setting up a situation in which the attacking side enters an area where it becomes vulnerable. In this conflict, U.S. support has changed many variables for Ukraine, especially in the realm of surveillance, targeting, and air power. Even if U.S. fighters are not directly flying combat missions in Ukraine, the aircraft deployed in nearby regions influence situational awareness, timing, and deterrence. Ukraine has demonstrated repeatedly that it knows how to use terrain, mobility, and intelligence to offset Russian strength. When Russian troops mass in one area, Ukraine rarely confronts them head-on. Instead, Ukrainian forces look for ways to overstretch them, disrupt their logistics, and make them commit to attack routes that seem favorable but actually expose them to precision strikes. This approach mirrors strategies used by smaller armies throughout history. Don't fight where the enemy is strongest, fight where they become overconfident. The integration of Western supplied systems allows Ukraine to increase the precision and speed with which it can act once it identifies such opportunities. In modern warfare, fighters like the F-16, often discussed as pivotal platforms, do more than launch missiles. They act as airborne sensors, flying radar stations capable of tracking air and ground movement over large distances. Even if their role is primarily defensive, the presence of these aircraft changes the tactical picture. Their ability to detect Russian aircraft, drones, or missile launches forces Russia to be more cautious. That caution affects troop movement on the ground. If Russian commanders believe they have air cover or freedom of movement, but then discover Ukrainian forces have superior targeting data, their advancing troops can suddenly find themselves exposed. A battlefield trap usually forms around a predictable pattern of movement. Analysts have noted that Russia often relies on repeated tactics, heavy artillery preparation, probing attacks, and then frontal assaults using mechanized infantry. Such patterns allow Ukraine to prepare defensive zones that look weak but are heavily monitored. With U.S. intelligence, real-time satellite data, and Ukrainian drone reconnaissance, the picture becomes even clearer. When Russian units commit to pushing through what appears to be a breached line, it can quickly turn into a kill zone once Ukrainian forces unleash coordinated fire. This psychological aspect of modern warfare is also critical. Russian troops advancing under the belief that they are facing a retreating enemy can become more aggressive, spread out, and less cautious. When Ukrainian defenders then hit them with precision artillery, anti-armor missiles, or drone swarms, those units can be devastated in minutes. This dynamic has repeated itself in various battles throughout the conflict. The trap is not a single moment but a sequence, optical illusions created by controlled withdrawals, silence on certain fronts, or the deliberate use of decoys and false positions. U.S. Supplied weapons and training have contributed to Ukraine's ability to fight with precision rather than volume. This matters because Russia often relies on overwhelming numbers. When Ukraine can strike command posts, vehicle columns, and logistics hubs before Russian units even reach the front line, it undermines the entire offensive operation. A well-set trap doesn't just attack the soldiers in front, it collapses the support structure behind them. Without ammunition, clear orders, or communication, even large forces become ineffective. Air power plays a special role in shaping these scenarios. Even limited use of Western fighter jets changes Russian calculations. Russian aircraft cannot operate freely near frontline areas where Ukrainian radar-guided air defense systems are coordinated with Western tracking networks. This pushes Russian troops to advance without reliable air cover, making them more vulnerable to Ukrainian drones and artillery. The trap is not always physical, sometimes it is strategic. The absence of Russian air superiority becomes a quiet but significant factor. Ukraine's ability to rapidly deploy mobile units also contributes to the illusion of weakness. A position that looks abandoned may have concealed strike teams or drone operators waiting for the right moment. When Russian units move in, believing they have captured ground, they can suddenly find themselves bracketed by artillery from multiple directions. These are the kinds of surprise engagements that lead to dramatic descriptions of troops walking into hell. In reality, it is the result of careful planning, intelligence coordination, and disciplined execution. One of the core advantages Ukraine maintains is adaptability. Russian forces rely more heavily on pre-written orders, hierarchical communication, and mass. Ukraine uses flexible command structures that allow local commanders to react quickly. If a trap is forming and Russian forces adjust their plan abruptly, Ukraine can adapt in real time. When supported by accurate data from Allied surveillance and Ukrainian drones, these decisions can be made with precision. The trap tightens not because of luck but because of rapid tactical decision-making. Electronic warfare also plays a major role. When Russian units enter a zone where Ukraine can jam their communications or disrupt their drones, they lose situational awareness. This creates panic and delays, giving Ukrainian forces a clearer picture of their movements than they have of Ukraine's. A disoriented force is an exposed force. Add in guided rockets, cluster munitions, or long-range drones, and the battlefield becomes a chaotic and dangerous place for any advancing unit. It's important to understand that such moments are not isolated victories. They are part of a broader contest of intelligence, technology, and willpower. When Ukraine manages to spring such traps, it creates not only tactical victories, but also strategic consequences. Russian commanders become hesitant, slower to commit forces, and less confident in their assessments. This slows down offensives that rely on aggressive momentum. A stalled offensive is effectively a failed offensive, regardless of how many troops were committed. Ukraine's forces also rely on precision strikes against Russian supply depots, fuel reserves, and ammunition stockpiles. When these support structures weaken, Russian troops can walk into traps without even realizing it. An army without stable logistics is unpredictable, desperate, and easier to funnel into predictable corridors. Ukrainian intelligence often focuses on identifying these weak points long before a trap is executed. The battlefield is shaped weeks in advance, not just at the moment of combat. Meanwhile, Western support ensures that Ukraine remains capable of sustaining this kind of warfare. Advanced targeting systems, long-range missiles, and fighter jets help Ukraine establish pressure zones. Where Russian movement becomes risky, if Russian troops ignore that risk, they walk into concentrated Ukrainian fire. If they hesitate, they lose momentum. Either outcome benefits Ukraine in the long term. The partnership is not just about supplying weapons, it's about constructing an environment where Ukraine can use strategy to overcome numbers. Another major factor is morale. Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their homes have demonstrated resilience and ingenuity. Their familiarity with the terrain makes it easier to execute ambushes and controlled withdrawals. They know how to use forests, fields, riverbanks, and ruined towns to their advantage. Russian units, especially those made up of mobilized soldiers or private military contractors, often lack that familiarity. When they enter unfamiliar territory under unclear conditions, the chances of falling into a carefully prepared defensive zone increase dramatically. Russian troops moving in large formations can be detected from long distances. Ukraine uses this to its advantage the moment such formations become visible, whether through satellites, radar, or drone surveillance. Ukrainian commanders begin predicting their possible attack routes. If the terrain offers only a few viable paths, traps can be prepared in advance. Artillery positions are calibrated, drones are stationed, and obstacles are placed. When Russian units commit, the situation becomes deadly quickly. Ukraine's use of drone swarms has revolutionized how traps are executed. Small drones can track troop movements continuously, adjusting targeting data as units approach. Larger loitering munitions can wait silently above a column until the ideal moment to strike. This level of real-time control turns defensive positions into dynamic zones where Russian troops cannot predict where the next strike will come from. The psychological impact of being watched continuously also contributes to confusion and fear. The role of U.S. fighters in shaping the broader airspace cannot be understated. Even operating outside Ukrainian territory, their radar coverage, coordination with NATO Air Command, and deterrence against Russian aerial escalation influence the conditions on the ground. When Russia avoids using certain aircraft or missile systems out of caution, Ukraine gains more freedom to maneuver. That freedom helps Ukrainian forces create the illusion of weakness, drawing Russian troops into areas where Ukraine holds hidden advantages. In past battles, Ukraine has demonstrated its ability to appear overstretched while secretly bolstering its defenses in critical locations. This tactic relies on Russian confidence. If Russian troops believe Ukraine is withdrawing or collapsing in an area, they are more likely to push deeper without proper reconnaissance. Once they move beyond natural cover or into open fields, Ukrainian artillery can strike with devastating effectiveness. The trap is not about closing a door behind them, it's about guiding them into a place where they have no escape routes. Strategically, these traps serve a larger purpose, wearing down Russian manpower and equipment faster than Russia can replace them. Even if Russia continues offensive operations, losing experienced troops and mechanized vehicles at a high rate limits their future capabilities. A well-executed trap can destroy weeks of preparation in a single day. Ukraine's goal is to make every Russian advance costly, slow, and uncertain, turning Russian offensives into liabilities instead of successes. Logistically, a trap often begins with Ukrainian forces cutting off or targeting the supply lines that support the Russian units being lured forward. If the trap works, Russian troops find themselves in a position where retreat becomes dangerous, resupply becomes impossible, and communication becomes unreliable. In these conditions, even well-armed units can crumble quickly. The battlefield then shifts in Ukraine's favor, creating opportunities for counterattacks or local reclaiming of territory. This style of warfare underscores how Ukraine has adapted to fighting a larger force. Intelligence, mobility, precision, and psychological warfare form the backbone of its defense strategy. When combined with Western technology, this creates a hybrid form of warfare where Russia's traditional advantages are neutralized. The trap is not a single trick, it is a systemic approach to fighting smarter, not harder. As the conflict continues, the role of advanced air platforms, real-time intelligence, and coordinated defense networks will only grow more influential. Whether or not dramatic phrases like "walking into hell" get used, the reality is that modern warfare often comes down to who sees first, who understands faster, and who strikes with greater accuracy. In this environment, traps form naturally when one side possesses superior information. Ukraine's resilience, combined with Western strategic support, ensures that these opportunities continue to arise. And as long as Russian offensives rely on predictable movement and outdated tactics, the risk of falling into such traps remains high. The battlefield is not just a place of explosions, it is a place of decisions, calculations, and awareness. In this domain, Ukraine continues to demonstrate that it can turn limited resources into decisive advantages. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this breakdown informative, make sure to stay tuned for more detailed analyses and explanations. Your support helps keep this content going, and I appreciate every one of you watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.